record this stream to my hard disk, okay, just so that our marketing guys, they might want to take clips of it, and then I can point him to a higher resolution version of it. Yes, the big question: can we play on a Garnon Forest map? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, okay. So, yeah, let's jump to let's talk to. So the idea for tonight's show is I'm going to tell you about a lot of these maps that are being funded on BackerKit right now. I mean, what could be more fun than sit around and talk about, tell me about your character, tell me about your world. Those are like the funnest questions to answer, right? So let me, and by the way, I'm also kind of giddy tonight. I'm like really stretching my streaming OBS muscles. I do a show on Monday mornings, Computer versus Machine, 9 a.m. Pacific time, right here on twitch.tv/JunkOnTV. Anyway, and Marcus helped me set it all up. So he's our tech guy, and he is producer for Table Tates and so on. He and so now, but this time, like I set this all up myself, but like I was copying his scenes and his sources and then editing them, and so I think it's working. It seems to be working. People in chat talking at Tooth Dark and Arbo. So it's good. I also have all my maps are preloaded. Like I think I'm a little nervous that the whole thing's gonna crash. Like these maps are freaking huge files, and I have them all loaded at the same time. We'll see what happens. All right. Well, let's get to talking about maps because well, we should. Let me wait. I gotta make sure the right map is gonna come up first. Yeah, we're gonna start with Nisha, and yeah, there it is. Okay, great. Map mode. Oh, it's working. Okay, here it is. We make it wider so it's covering up the map. Yeah, so I'm just kind of doing this. This is a little bit on the fly tonight. Hope you guys don't mind. And so this is Nisha, and it's not scrolling correctly. Oh, that's a bad sign. Okay, I'm gonna try reloading it here. Okay, I'm gonna put you back on this screen so you can't see what I'm doing, and I'm gonna reload Nisha and see if we have what we want. Okay, that's okay. I can do this. There is this adage that how long it takes to do something on a computer is inversely proportional to how many people are watching you. But let's try this. Okay, let's go back to map mode. There we go, map mode. Okay, I start by showing these cool. So this is the map of Nisha. This is one of the main continents of Chaldea, and I just like this graphic. Steve did these great graphics that pop up on all of our map. Each map has a distinctive like that. Let's go even closer. Really show that off. There you go. So this is the map of Nisha, and okay. So Nisha is is the continent where I started DMing. When I first started creating Chaldea, I started in Nisha, and specifically, I started in the Garnon Forest, which is right here. And we can make this a little bigger. Oh yeah, this is working. Somebody stop me. Wow, yeah, look at that. Yeah, I mean, you're having to see me move mouses and shit around, but who cares, right? I mean, like, there we go, the Garnon Forest. So, so this is where I started. I started Chaldea. I started DMing Chaldea in 1980. It was the year before I'd learned how to DM, and I started, learned D&D in 1978. 79, I was doing a lot of experimental stuff, trying to figure out what I was going to do. But in 1980 is when I actually started, okay, I'm done running modules. I ran one module. Now I want to start my own world. And I wanted to start with the enchanted forest, the classic idea of enchanted forest. I love the idea of an enchanted forest. Like, it was just somewhere all sorts of magic can happen, right? And so, and I did the classic mistake on my original maps. I did the classic mistake that people who are idiots about bats. Hi, Sarah. Yeah, Toothmark did almost die there. And that I had a river coming down that forked and then went to the ocean twice, as opposed to, forks coming in like this and then forming one river. So the original map of the Garnon Forest, had this river, this southern river, came out of this point here. And obviously that didn't work, so we eventually fixed that. So in the Garnon Forest, first of all, it's like it is the place. I used the mythology of the World Tree, Yggdrasil. The elves call it the Mother Tree. That all the different worlds are connected by Yggdrasil, and the Garnon Forest is like the specific place in Chaldea where that happens. And there's a very mystical place called Tartu, which is up here towards the top. And Tartu it's actually got like the St. Louis Arch. It's got this huge friggin' arch that comes up, which is a root of the World Tree. So this is like where the World Tree comes up out of the plain, does this, and at the base of this root is this mystical portal. You can go to all sorts of different worlds there. And in fact, we have a picture. Okay, we're gonna test something else here. We're gonna try seeing whether I can show you a piece of art that Steve just sent me, and it works. Look at Steve, it's working. So there, yeah, you see the root of the World Tree coming up, and in the distance is one of the mountains of Tavia, and there's a little town here called Tartu, and it's very mystical. It's where all the cultists hang out and weird soothsayers, and it's way out, and it's deep in the Garnon Forest, so it's hard to get to, and the Garnon Rangers hang out here, so that's pretty cool. So thank you, Steve. Woohoo! Yeah, and okay, gotta reset this and that, and so forth. So the Garnon Forest, what's a good forest without a good, what's a forest without a good swamp, right? So in my over-the-top high school days while I'm doing this, I wanted this super cool mystical forest, and I wanted a super cool swamp, like a really nasty swamp. Like, this swamp is so badass that anybody goes in, like only Conan, back in the days when I used plagiarized characters. I can't do that anymore, but Conan and Cole the Destroyer used to go into the swamp of Con and harvest Black Lotus, and that's also where the swamp demons are, what's now called the Drazeldar. They come from the swamp of Con. So badass, super badass swamp in a big mystical forest, and that was the beginnings of Chaldea. And by the way, we've gone through several iterations of these maps. The maps you're seeing here are professionally done. I mean, meaning instead of me, Steve and Tanel and Rob Lazzarati, who is a professional cartographer, also worked on these maps. The original maps look more like wargaming maps, and Steve is kind enough to insist that you see this. So here is the original Chaldea maps. I made them on hex paper, and I just colored different hexes depending on the terrain. And here, by the way, you see the Garnon Forest. I mean, this is the Garnon Forest, and this is the Swamp of Con. And so you could, and here, by the way, here you, here you have the forked river that goes the wrong direction. One river comes down, then forks and goes to two different locations. I mean, oh my God. And I did actually at some point come up with a contrived, well, maybe it goes through like this really super narrow gorge and the Dwarves Belt, and just like, well, no, let's just change the map. Okay, so we did, yeah. We also have, I've mentioned the Drazeldar in the Swamp of Con, and we have a picture of that. I can show you. These are the Drazeldar are the guardians of the Emperor Kradava, and he had this is what basically the tanks that Cordova used to take over Chaldea. And hey, Lord Master Ski, and Steve. This is these Drazdar were his personal bodyguards and stuff. So when he got assassinated, he was accompanied by 20 of these, and everybody's like, "What? There's no way. How did that happen?" So that's a big mystery in the Chaldea storyline, is that the Emperor gets assassinated and nobody knows who did it. I mean, we know, but can't tell you. That'd be way too big a spoiler. So, but anyway, there's the Drazdar, and in the foreground is Priyanka, one of our characters, having a conversation with the Drazdar. So, trying to. All right, so that when I started DMing, I was overwhelmed also at the idea of, like, I'm creating a world I haven't created yet. I don't know what the world is. When I first started DMing it, I didn't want to have characters in the world who had who were from this world. I wanted them to come from somewhere else so that I could develop the world kind of ahead of their travels. And so we had a city that we now call Ogstadt, but in my earlier versions it was called Cordova, which is also the name of the Emperor. Long story. Anyway, there was a portal system in my original versions of Chaldea, not anymore, where you could come into Chaldea from other worlds, and like Sigil, if you will, and where you would arrive would be in this city. So did a lot of DMing of city-town stuff in this location back in the day. This is now a Germanic sort of kingdom, and we have a picture of Ogstadt that we can show off. This is oh my God, Steve outdid himself on this one. This is a picture of Ogstadt coming in to the harbor with that's not Enchantment's Guard. Enchantment's Guard's off to the left, right? This is Steve will have to help me out here. I've been doing this long enough that I forget, and I'm getting older. I can't remember even my own world anymore. Wow, yeah. So anyway, this is I don't know, and I always pictured Hesse as kind of a hilly green. It's Altaflector. This was the old original site of the city, which was as much of it's in ruins because I think a dragon got mad there once, as it happens. All right, so going down, let's expand out a little bit. One of the so when people would come through this portal and go into the Garden Forest, that was when I first started doing adventures. I started drawing the map of this continent, and I quickly okay, where are the orcs? And I respect the new D&D with all the tamed down version of orcs. That's fine. Do what you want to do what you got to do. But in my world, the orcs are, they're pretty much evil, violent, because there's a dragon that kind of manipulates them to be that way. They're in the Divinity Mountains. At the heart of the Divinity Mountains, this is the Orc Empire. The heart of the Divinity Mountains is this place called Tartur, and I want to zoom in on this a little bit so you can see. The purple lines are underground tunnel systems, and Tartu is deep under. It's an underground city, and it is connected by tunnels to a ring of orc fortresses. Now, this is an Orc Empire now, but originally these were all dwarven. This was the main dwarven homeland, and this was it had a different name, a dwarven name, and that's where the Throne of the Gods was. And the old AD&D book DMG artifact, the Throne of the Gods, was in Tartu. Well, now what's in it is an elder dragon named Surinil, and Surinil is he's like Dragar is in the Game of Thrones series right now. I mean, he is he is violent, vicious, nasty. He's the Diamond Dragon, and he is mortal enemies with the mithril dragon called Merithian, who's a friend of dwarves. And in 1,000 years ago, they had a big fight here, and Merithian went down a hole, and Surinel has been sitting there ever since for 1,000 years, waiting for Merithian to come out. And he runs the Orc Empire, and we of course have some lovely images here. Let's go back to Ogstadt. This was another view of Ogstadt, sort of a top-down view. It's a nice, very lovely map, and and some of the orc fortresses. So we went, and of course, you tell Steve, hey, orc fortresses. I mean, he immediately starts drawing them. I mean, just if you know my buddy Steve, he's like, oh, dwarven fortresses that are now orc fortresses. Yeah, give me that. So so this is this is Glagu Gore, and I mean it's pretty crazy, and let me get through. The next one is Gorgbosht Gore. Now, if anybody from my really old campaign is watching, they're gonna freak out because this is. Well, I'll tell you in a moment. But I did my first dungeon I ran in Chaldea was set below this fortress, like the underground piece of this. Like you're miles away, that fortress isn't even on your radar, and there's a dungeon entrance that is really underneath this this one, Gorgbosht Gur. And then we mentioned the Surinel on the Throne of the Gods, or at least wrapped around the Throne of the Gods. There you go. And you can, let's see, you kind of can just barely see the Actoroke symbol here is kind of covering up a little bit, but in the foreground here on the floor, you just barely see that there's a big hole that goes down. And so there's Surinel. He's watching orcs fight, and part of the fighting could be that you shove your buddy down the hole. I mean that's all. That's just good, clean fun right there. Yeah. And here's another orc fortress. This is Molwitz Gore. And these are just massive fortresses that dwarves built, and then orcs came along and added their own special touch. And finally, Brig Gore, which is, I wanted one that was kind of like shaped like a Colosseum, and then it's just at the bottom of the Colosseum is just like the shaft that goes down, and so there it is. And I think the terrain, I mean the mountains and stuff like that, is particularly beautiful on this one here. So there we go. All right, what am I missing? I had Surinel's Commode was the name of the the hole that Surinel sits by, waiting for Merithian to come out. All right, so this so here's Gorgbosht Gore, and when I used to DM there, and there was even Montfort was the name of the local keep that the adventurers could base out of and go up. So there's always this, a bit of overland travel to the dungeon itself, and then back. And the kingdom here of Teutonique, let me expand out just a little bit. I was interested in this idea of a kingdom that is not very well developed, very wildernessy, and right in the shadow of the Orc Empire, right? So it's like this is so rough that it's like bum f, you know what I mean, right? And the idea for it was that it was settled originally by the Perts, which are an ethnic group that's sort of modeled after out of post-Norman Britain, and they settled this area, but it was so costly, and they weren't getting much out of it, that they sold it to the Hessens, which are Germanic in nature. So it is a kingdom where most of the nobility is Germanic and the the peasants are British basically, and this is I don't know. I find it just an interesting area, and the idea in our story when after the emperor dies and the orcs, of course, like no longer with the emperor telling him no, you can't, you have to be peaceful orcs. They attack, of course, and so this is where they come raging into Teutonic. Let's see. Lord Masterski says, I need to show you Bastion one day. Nowhere near as much as Chaldea, but my own baby wrapped up in historical nerdiness. Yes, I love historical nerdiness. Speaking of historical stuff that are ripped off, over here is Ardea, which is desert. And I was really inspired by my trip to Jordan a few years ago. I went to Petra, and so I created this kingdom I already had the idea that there was an Arab kingdom here, and so I created these really beautiful, like these. I decided that most of the population of the kingdom lives in these big chasms that go down, kind of like at Petra, and that they're incredibly lush down there, and there's a mystical reason why that is the case. And then there's this the endless desert where there's these lakes, this water runs off and just goes into these lakes, and then it just eventually evaporates. The water never makes it to the coast. And then there's trade routes here with what are called the free city states. And then Mycenae is a Greek-inspired kingdom that. Of course, you gotta have Greeks. I love mythology, so any place with a strong mythology is gonna, jump out at me. So yeah, that's where the Greek stuff comes from. And then this, oh yeah, okay. So this is the Greymory is Greymory, the Greymory Waste, is what some people call it. And this is like, I mean, we use magical. There's like magical fields or whatever here, but we use fantasy stuff, but like. This is really a radiation zone inspired by Gamma World, because Gamma World was an amazing game system, especially the random random mutations chart in Gamma. I mean, who didn't roll off that? So I had to have a place in the world where if you wanted to roll off the random mutations chart, well, go to Greymory and take a swim, and you get a random mutation, or you might just die. I mean, that's it. Kanahu is based off of Phoenician culture. Somatia is based off of the Hittites. I think it's almost impossible to have different cultures in a fantasy world without borrowing from real world culture, because you can't invent cultures like architecture, what modes of dress, all the stuff like that. It seems pretty difficult to just and unnecessary and way too much work to like invent all that stuff. So I in this iteration of Chaldea maps, starting about 10 years ago when we redid all the maps, we decided that every kingdom would have an anchor in some real world place and time, so we inspired that way. And so Somatia is inspired by the Hittites of Anatolia, central Turkey, back like 11th century BC, something like that. Up here, just to finish up Nisha, we have Griot Tunagarder, which is not inspired by anything real world. These are hill giants. So and also Tavia, and up here Jotunholm. Between Jotunholm and Griot Tunagarder, those are giant kingdoms, hill giants and frost giants, basically. But we don't call them that. We use our own terms. But and then Tavia is a Norse-inspired kingdom, where instead of raiding on ships, they raid on riding lions, so on flying lions. So you see little lion symbols here. And their capital city of Denorum is accessible only by flight. And so if you want to get to Denorum, you gotta fly there. And that's pretty badass, So we riffed more off of the idea of the Northlander. Norse mythology is way too much fun to ignore. And And here we go. I knew if I just stalled there just a moment, Steve would come in with a map with a beautiful artwork of Denorum. So this is Denorum. That hole is called the Howd. I think Steve will correct me if I get any of this wrong. And please do. So this is where the capital of the Tavians is. And I got to DM a scenario there recently in the current Burning Saratov campaign. One of the player characters went there and stole a statue. She had a little help from some guy named Zune. Yeah, anyway, and that's a beautiful piece of art. I've used this art. We actually blew up and made a backdrop out of it. And I've used that for photography and stuff on a couple of occasions. I used to stream with this in the background too sometimes. But all right, that is hello, 10-inch. First time chat, welcome to this. So yeah, that's a good excuse for me to remind you that we do have a crowdfunder going on right now, and where you can get your own copies of these maps, digital copies, at least for now. Maybe if we figure out a way to print them at an economical size, we could add that as some sort of add-on package thing. But we don't know how to do that yet. We're still working out. Okay, so moving on from niche, you notice that this map has this big dark area here and this border here. So this is technically another continent off to the left. So the map is just kind of leading you to that idea here because the two continents are connected. So I'm going to close Nisha and go to Tamika. Oh my God, coincidence! It happens to be the next one on the pile. Yes, it is a large map painting, that map of Denorum. So Tamika is the most populated part of Chaldea. It is the most civilized part of Chaldea. It is it's big, it's flourishing, it's where the imperial capital of Saratov is, and it's imperial capital of the Kordovan Empire in Saratov, which is the imperial capital in the kingdom of Rush, which is Russian themed, as you might have guessed. And so here's the beautiful graphic of that. So now let's expand out. Let's expand all the way out so you kind of see the whole thing a little bit. And you can see now this is the Nanisha map. The part of the Nanisha map that's connected here is now all browned out, and we see in living color all the Tamika map. And so let's go right to the heart of the matter. Over here is the imperial capital, is Saratov, and it's right there. And we have on our map we have an inset, that blows it up and does a closer look of what the capital is. And so this is let me see if I can also kind of there we go. So you see the harbor, ships coming in and out, and all that stuff like that. And we have the Imperial Palace grounds and the mall and the Senate discourse, all the Hall of Records, etc. The huge buildings that are, the big important buildings you'd expect to find in the capital of an entire planet. And so that's here. This is where Kordava lived. This is a huge temple to Set, because Set's the state religion of the empire, and so on. And we have a beautiful picture. And I'm going to pop up a picture. The picture I'm going to show you is, imagine you're here, the Senate discourse, up on top of it, apparently, looking down the mall towards the palace grounds, including the Colossus of the Emperor here. All right, so let me get this going for you. I love this piece. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. And it's so yeah, so you're looking down the mall, people walking, and that's the Imperial Palace, the Obelisk of Law, and colossus of Credava in the background, the temple of Set, etc. And it's pretty cool. Thought this was always really loved this piece. And for some reason it's purple, which I mean, it's probably not purple, but it sure looks good in purple. I mean, that's just cool. I don't know, just amazing. So let's enlarge back out, and so some fun places for adventuring here. There is a good orc place here called the Hills of Hatred, where there's an orc kingdom there, and it's an orc kingdom. It's not ruled by an elder dragon, but there's some funky stuff going on there. And then there's an elf kingdom right next door. So I mean, what could go wrong? The Georgian Forest. I mean, you got to put the elves and the orcs near each other because they just love to fight each other, So that just makes sense. And there's an elder dragon that lives over here in this little town called Perth. And Latium is a Rome-inspired kingdom, and so Credava conquered the world not only with his Drazzledar, but in the vanguard of a number of Roman-style legions. And the Contubernium is the West Point, if you will, of Roman legion officer school. For where you become a tribunus or a legatus, the various ranks. And so on. The just north of that is the kingdom of Tashamau. Tashamau is the term Tashamau is Egyptian for Egyptian, or ancient Egyptian for ancient Egyptian, and so we took this is very much inspired by. I mean, ancient Egypt. I mean, how cool is that? You can't have. I can't have a fantasy campaign not have a place that's ancient Egypt, and I've run some great. I have a one-shot adventure that I run out of Taubos on the southern edge of this. Look deep in the archives of our YouTube channel; you can probably find it somewhere. So, the kingdom of Set, the religion of Set, is the dominant religion of Chaldea by imperial decree, because Credava, who was a demigod, and I say was because he got assassinated, he was a demigod of Set, and so to be loyal to Set, pretty much outlawed other religions throughout most of Chaldea, not all of Chaldea. Well, now that he's dead, Tashamau is now the most the most violent place right now in Chaldea, the most strife, the most civic unrest is in Tashamau, because all these other religions of Egyptian gods that were suppressed by the emperor are all rising up and all upset, and so the Church of Set is in a big war in Tashamau to reestablish control of the kingdom. And over here is Dire Wood. Sarah would be upset if I didn't mention this, because she's playing a character who is the etharch, the queen, if you will, of this elven kingdom called Dire Wood. And Dire Wood is it's. I love the idea. I think I got it from back in the day when Pakistan had east and west, was divided, and the idea of having a country that's divided or has a really awkward shape to it, like Chile or something. I embraced that idea in creating the Dire Wood, because the border down here, it's got this sliver that comes all the way to the water, and then it's got this narrow choke point, and then this kingdom of spiders who are not nice, are hostile, aggressive, but the elves managed to have sort of, a way of managing that relationship. So it's just kind of an awkward shaped kingdom, which I think makes it interesting. The Blaska Mountains, Felis, is it's a culture of berserkers. Yeah, I always like the idea of berserkers, so why not? Vlachia is sort of inspired by Wallachia real world, which is modern day Romania. So there might be. I mean, I hate to be stereotypical or cliche, but there might be vampires there. I don't know. Maybe there could be, but it does not that you see normal. Like it's not like everybody's a vampire there, but there's probably some. And then we talked about Rouge and stuff. One other place I want to show you. Let's zoom out just a little bit on this map is the Carmania Shelf. The Carmania Shelf is a lot of trade in Chaldea is done on coastal trade, along the King's Highway and stuff like that. But it's so far to go from Mantis to the ports of Hakamanich, that and Tashimau. Like for these kingdoms here to trade with each other, basically these overland trade route network developed, and these big giant wagons that go across this shelf and connect trade routes with all these kingdoms that surround it. But it's kind of wildernessy and it's kind of fun, and I've DM'd adventures there as well. With Steve Connor, as a matter of fact. Okay. Let me take a little sip. Oh, I see that Steve has queued up some more art for me. Let's see here. Chaldea world map. Okay, I'm going to try to remember to come back to that one. We do some fun things like this is fun. Like when Cordova took over the world, he started in Rouge, and we drew out military style, like his first the first war where he distinguished himself as a mortal, as a commander. We mapped out how Rouge, with him as one of the legatai in the military, took over Kazakhstan, which was the kingdom to the north, and that was sort of the opening gambit, if you will, for hostiles, for Cordova's to eventually take over the entire world. Yes, I will always be a war gamer. That's absolutely right, Douglas. We talked about Set being the Cordova's a demigod of Set. So this is an image we did of Set, and that's really, really cool. And it's Set looking through a book of a book of maps that are magical, where you can look and basically scry into different worlds, a book of worlds type thing, and these animals here, of course, animate, and the high priests of Set might have one of these in their employ, and if they do, watch out, because they're badass. I didn't mention. Yeah, this Juba. Let's mention Juba. Thank you, Steve. On back to the Carmania Shelf. This southern kingdom here, Andalus, has showed up into a number of our stories. The Bulgarians storyline, the Bulgarians start having been imprisoned for crimes in Andalus, and they are let loose. They're given their freedom in exchange for adventuring for the guildmaster of the merchants guildmaster of Andalus sends them out to Graver's Dig, and that's how that storyline starts. And we did this Juba's the capital city, and we did a really beautiful blow up map of Juba here. Whoops. How did that happen? There we go. Lovely effort by Steve here for this map. Yeah, and I'm sitting here trying to remember the name of the merchant guildmaster, Rahat, Malika Rahat. Yes. Okay, I'm going to go back to another image that Steve popped up here. that so back when I was DMing Chaldea originally, back in the old days, Chaldea kind of looked like this. And you can see this part over here kind of looks like the Nisha map, and this kind of looks like the Tamika map, and they're joined together. And over here is some other maps that we haven't seen yet tonight, but Samaria, where Graverstig is, and Acadia, and so on and so forth. And it was very much a realistic fantasy world, in the sense that you just, like, everything's laid out like in a sensible way. Like you would sail, like if you wanted to sail from Hesse to Perrin, like, okay, you'd sail this way and get over here. And I decided when we just sort of decided to create Chaldea as a property that we might commercialize and publish and all that sort of stuff like that. I had this idea for doing something a little different, and so what if we decided that the ocean that separates all the continents of Chaldea, what if that ocean was a mystical sea as opposed to a science, or a oceans like we would understand oceans to be? Like, it's a magical world, it's a fantasy world. What if they just worked differently? So we came up with this idea called the Endless Sea, and that all the continents of Chaldea are floating on this endless sea, and they don't actually have any east, west, north, south orientation to each other. On a given continent, there is a north, east, west, south orientation, but when you leave a continent to go to another continent and start sailing, when you get like 20-30 miles off coast, how far depends, you've left the continental shelf that's underneath that continent. When you leave that, you go into a mystical voyage. And in one time, if you sailed straight out of the harbor, you might end up in Dorsong. Another time, you might end up in Muramaki, or you might end up in Perrin. It's not going to be the same. And the way to navigate the Great Sea is not through astronomy, it's through astrology. You literally follow the stars, and folklore both play a part in how you do this. And also, in thinking about this, I've always thought that the constellations in the sky, in the real world, you're like, okay, that's a bear, and that's Orion, and you look at them and go, really? Okay, I guess so. What is that one again? I can't tell. So we thought, what if the constellations in the night sky of Chaldea are just really vivid, really colorful, and you can tell what it is. And what if it is that, actually? Like, what if these are creatures in the night sky that have an intellect and are and have the type of influence on the world that people in the real world think astrology has in the real world. But of course, we don't all believe that. Some of us do, some of us don't. I'm not going to opine on that. Anyway, so in Chaldea, the stars these Numians are real. Okay, and so of course, Steve has queued up a image for me. Oh wow, there's a lot going on actually in this image. So you can see this constellation in the upper right corner, and it's I think that's Phoenix. I'm not sure. And you can see a navigator. This particular navigator happens to be named Mav, or short for Mavra, perhaps. But who knows what that means. Mav is using a magical item here, some sort of a spell, and is navigating to where she wants her ship to go based on the Numians, and understanding what Numians like to hang out with other Numians, and where Numians like to haunt. Every Numian has a favorite place in Chaldea it likes to haunt. So if you find the Numian that likes to haunt the place that you're at, if you find that Numian, then you can follow that Numian and get to that location. Or if that Anumian's not around, well, you know that Anumian happens to hang out with another Anumian, and you can follow that Anumian because they'll eventually find the first Anumian, and then you can follow that one. So that's I wanted the idea of traveling the ocean to be more of a mystical event than an astronomical event. So that's why our Chaldea maps that we're showing you all look like different places. We're not showing you a big map of all of Chaldea because you can't draw that, which frustrates Steve to knowing because he really wants us to have a big Chaldea map like this one. And like, no, you can't do it. Okay, so this is Tamika. Okay, I'm just going to go random now and see what comes up next. I'm going to close this one and see what we got. Samaria. Okay, Samaria is the biggest continent. It is the wildest and the craziest and the most primitive. If Tamika is the most civilized, Samaria is the opposite of that. I mean, there are a couple of places that are incredibly civilized, but the rest of the continent is, for most of the continent, is just very bizarre. The two kingdoms that are civilized that live here are very powerful. They have to be to deal with how wild the rest of the continent is. And those two kingdoms, one of them is an elf kingdom, and let me just enlarge. Let me give you this is how big Samaria is. It is just massive, and there's several pieces of interest. So one of the most powerful elven kingdom in Chaldea here is Linwood. It's kind of generally considered the capital of the elves. There's a huge elf tree there, and so on and so forth. Anyway, it is here primarily because of the threat of Samaria. And the reason Samaria is so wild and crazy is that this place down here, called the Urakan, is an active, open gate to the Chaos Plains. So chaos creatures are wandering into Chaldea from these plains all the time. And sometimes a chaos army comes wandering into Chaldea. And there's a couple times where Cordava had to go down there and kill some chaos lord. Just like get the hell out of here. This is my place. So the Elf Kingdom is here as protectorates of Chaldea from whatever might come through. Also Targonia. Targonia is based on Central African mythology, especially the Ife and other Central African cultural touchstones there in mythology. And it's a very advanced culture in Chaldea. The rest of this is all just pretty much wild, crazy stuff. Marn is like this massive, it's one plant that's the size of a huge jungle, and it is a huge living plant. It has all sorts of crazy creatures. It's very hostile to go in there, and it's also where all sorts of crazy drugs come from. So, not that we would advocate that, but it does come from there. We have we got a couple other things here. Oh, we were talking about Numians earlier. I think Steve posted. This is worth digressing to. We have, because the Anumians influence events like the way people who believe in astrology think that constellations do in our world. And in the real world, people use tarot decks for divination. And of course, D&D has the deck of many things and lots of D&D themed tarot decks that are out there. We created what we call a Fate deck, which is Chaldea inspired, and each one of the Anumians that is part of the noble court of Chaldea is represented on a card. And so here's an example of a card. This is a musician. Up in the top, you see what musician looks like in the sky. And down below is this, is a piece of art that illustrates the idea of musician, but there's just all sorts of details. I mean, like, and yes, we will eventually have a crowdfunder where we show these off. We're waiting for them to get finished first, because this is still not all done, although it's getting pretty close to done. All these, if you look through, the idea is that like a well-drawn tarot card, if you look at it, it gives you ideas for divination. So with that as the mandate, Steve and Studio Volts and Tanel have created all this artwork that is just evocative on so many levels, having to do with news. Okay, let's, I'm getting a long ways from maps here, but that's a nice little teaser for something that you can expect in the future. Oh my god, I'm getting a lot of direct sunlight in here. Sorry. I don't know what to do about it. It's going to get worse and worse because the sun is over there and it's lowering into these windows. But, oh well. I can lower the ISO on these images, make them not quite as bright. Oh well. Also, we have several Actoroke series that RPG campaigns that have been based in what's called Graverstig, and Graverstig's not on this version of the map, and Sheol's on the wrong side of the river. Steve, I know you did a newer version of this. Obviously, I keep going back to the wrong one, but we did. The fact that Sheol is on the wrong side of this river actually became a funny line in a story where Megan, Carrie Nasser's character, was complaining about is the head of cartography, and is complaining about the previous cartography because like and they put Sol on the wrong side of the river. Anyway, you take happy accidents and you turn them into story plots. So the Imperial cartographer got this one wrong, not Megan's character, the previous one. We have a couple of nice pictures of related back to the Chaos Gates of the. This is a picture of a Chaos Warlord coming through Huracan with a Chaos Army behind him. I mean, that's just good, clean fun right there. It's just, yeah, they look ready. They look ready. They look almost like a Warhammer sort of level of ready. I mean, that's pretty good. And then we have a character in our stories named Alex, who is a martial artist. I always love martial arts, and I created a bunch of martial arts classes in my early versions of Chaldea. And here's Alex going up against a big giant. And so, this is just like there's a big, huge fight going on, and here's this martial artist is just jumping. She's a Chan style martial artist, which are big on jumping long distances. That's their thing. And going after this giant. Oh my god, that's a great piece. Thank you for queuing that one up, Steve. Okay, and even though Graverstig is not on this map, we do have a map of Graverstig that we can show you. That would go right there. And probably the new maps we release, we might have fixed that. Whoops, that's not it. No, that is it. Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's make this bigger. Can we do that? Will it let us make this bigger? Yeah. There we go. Okay, that didn't really help. Let's see. I don't know why I'm not seeing the plus minus signs that let me enlarge that. But here is a map of we do have a map of Graverstig. We will be including a map of Graverstig and the region around Graverstig in our Gazetteer that we are. By the way, did you know we have a BackerKit going on right now, crowdfunder on BackerKit called the Chaldea Gazetteer, and it will not only be all these big maps I'm showing you, but we also have some regional maps like this map of Graverstig. So Graverstig is like a hunting ground to go out and hunt into the wilds of Samaria, and there's a hunting lodge, and there's tournaments for hunting, and it's really, really horrible, but a lot of fun. Horrible in terms of the, like, well, what are they going out killing? I mean, like, they're just being to go kill whatever? Yeah, just go kill whatever. Well, that's bad. You're right, it's bad, but it's also, so characters can kind of wrestle with those moral complexities. And here's an image. Here's another image of Marn, and a Marn elf trying to escape Marn, and this one over here. This one I think succeeds, but I think this one doesn't. That one probably doesn't either, and that one's definitely not going to. So sometimes Marn kind of comes to life and becomes particularly violent and hostile to people that dare go in there. All right, let's. That is Samaria. Let's. And so much I'm over. Taxia is where all the. I just got to show. Taxia is where the Psionists come from in Chaldea. The Taxians are a particular ethnic group that delve into the mental arts, and they're not very nice because it's more fun if they're not nice. That's just what makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the Panarindi Islands. This is a kingdom that has. Oh wow! Okay, so this is a kingdom of islands that has kind of an interesting thing. There's this huge whirlpool on an oceanic level that is just continuously sucking things down, and its influence is across the Great Sea, and people think that everything in Chaldea will ultimately get sucked down the Tongdao. And islands or pieces that break away from larger continents are brought here, and the way, and it's all in slow motion. These islands come and they start spinning around the Tongdao, but it might take them 3 or 4 centuries before they actually go down the center part of the Tongdao. And there's various theories about what's on the other side of it. Some say that it's like another Chaldea. It's just like a different sort of world, but like a Chaldea-like world that also has the same sort of thing happening. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, maybe jet dev, we like to say. Sometimes we say jet dev means just-in-time development. We figure out what's there when we need to figure it out. So these islands are circle around, and the island, like this one, is falling into the Tongdao, and you notice that all the life has been stripped off of it because of just the violent storms have destroyed any life, any plants, trees, anything that was on that island is just gone. Not even mountains remain. They've just been leveled going in. So anyway, that's that. Tritonus is a map. This is all inspired by Greek mythology, specifically mermaids and tritons, which I play as male and female of the same species, and they're this is not like the friendly mermaids like Roxanne type style. No, they pretty much are evil and hate humans and devour them and kill them and eat them or enslave them so they have a constant source of food. Yeah, something like that. And so a lot of the map is showing residences of various Triton clans or groups, families, and then as you get closer, this inner part here is all surrounded by these beautiful rock reefs, these beautiful reefs that surround it, and you kind of have to know how to get in, otherwise it's going to be very dangerous to sail in. But this water is all very shallow, this part of the ocean is, and then there's these mountains, these islands in the middle that are like regular islands that humans could live on. And the capital city is Tritea, and the Tritons and these people are crazy like pirates. And again, now that Credava is dead, now the Emperor's dead, there's nobody telling them they can't go out and embrace their inner pirating nature. Yeah, the Tongdao eats islands. Exactly right. Uh, so that's Tritonis. You probably don't want to go there. It's not good. There are humans that live there, and there are like a lot of humans, like humans who or elves or dwarves or whatever, orcs who have ships that engage in piracy that are working for the Tritons. So if you're a pirate ship, if you encounter a pirate ship in Chaldea, there's a good chance that it's backed by Tritons. And if you go mess with it, it might have a Triton on board who will mess you up. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe not. What's next? Dorsang. Okay, so Dorsang is very Celtic-inspired kingdom. I love the legend of the Tuatha De Danann and Celtic mythology. And so we have a island kingdom that is mostly where that culture is from. And so it has a very sort of Irish, British, but we riff off of all the UK cultures there, like the Welsh mythology as well as Celtic mythology and so on and so forth. This there is a couple of things of note here. The bards, of course, are very tied to Celtic mythology in the real world. So the bard school where you would learn to be a bard is called the University of Dorsang, and it is also a bard school, and it is right here, the University of Dorsang, and the University of Dorsang is just north of the capital city of Esh, which is a very well-known city in Chaldea, is often referred to. It is the one place in Chaldea where the worship of all gods is tolerated. And so when Cordava told everybody, hey, you can't worship anybody you like, you can only worship Set, but if you're really that committed to Odin or whatever, and you just it's this thing, you can go to this one city. And so this city's just got overrun by foreigners from all over Chaldea, and who all wanted to build temples, but they also brought a lot of wealth with them. And so Esh, the Dorians rolled with the flow and kind of let Esh become its own thing, this very big metropolitan city with all these different. Let's see, Lord Masterski, my question is, where can I get a U of D hoodie? That's a great idea. We should have a U of D hoodie. Yeah, that's a great idea. Or at least a sweatshirt, right? I mean, somebody start working on that. Yeah. Okay. So the city of Esh. Most self-respecting Dorians don't live in Esh, right? It's mostly foreigners and people that want to scam off the foreigners, and otherwise they're out here in beautiful places like Bogey Dark Timber and Fat Face Peak and the Tongue Fortress and so on. It's we just kind of let one thing I've always enjoyed about British culture, and I apologize for kind of blending these all together, but just all the fun names that you find in places like Ireland and Scotland and so on. Anyway, so yeah, there's that, and a lot of mythology type stuff. I view, even though this island is small, I see it as very, like, you go into the forest, it's very fey, it's very mystical, it's very untamed, the island. So it's a fun. I've adventured there. I've run adventures there as well. Speaking of British culture, we have the island of Perrin. Perrin, also, by the way, an homage to Steve Perrin, who was the co-author with Gary Gygax of Chainmail. And I was like, Arneson and Gygax give a lot of credit. I thought, Steve Perrin should get a lot of credit too, because it was a pretty important piece that came out and that led to D&D. And the Tongue Fortress. Okay, I'll go back to. Well, I'm not going to go back there, but I'll tell you. I threw out the Tongue Fortress. So the Tongue Fortress is a fortress up in the mountains, and there is the ramp up to the fortress is literally a tongue. Architecturally. And it's a small keep. It's not a very big keep. It's just the Tongue Fortress, but the ramp is like this tongue that comes down which of course just begs to have like a Indiana Jones style ball that can roll down and wipe out anybody in its path. And there's a guy that lives there called the Fortress Defender, and his job is to defend the fortress. That's his job. He lives there. He shows up in our Zane. So he's gonna in the course of our Chaldea story, Fortress Defender will show up from time to time. But he has he's really super powerful. I mean, he's like a super high level barbarian, and I think it's safe to. I don't think it's a spoiler to say his backstory. His backstory is that he used to run around with the Norse gods like Thor and Loki and Odin and all those guys. He used to run around with them, and in Chaldea history, that particular pantheon has had the most direct contact with the Cthulhian gods, which are now public domain. So I include them. I mean, who doesn't want Cthulhian gods in their fantasy world? It was in the original AD&D deities and demigods, after all, the whole Cthulhian pantheon. So of course I used it. Yeah, right. Oh, you got FD. Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Oh, so anyway, he had too close of an encounter with some Cthulhian creature and went crazy, and so now he thinks that his mission is that he's got to defend this fortress. That's all he can do. So anyway, yeah, we have a picture of him here. There he is, up there on the left. Oh, there he is, right there, Fortress Defender, and he's having a conversation with Zane, which is one of our characters, and Desiree, love interest of Zane's. So anyway, there it is, nice picture. That's in Esh, by the way. There's a city bard, because you have the Bard School nearby, the University of Dorsang. Well, of course, there's got to be a pub crawl area where everybody goes and gets drunk. So it's one of those bars. And speaking of the University of Dorsang, and the Bardic School, here it is. It's a lovely piece. Also from the Zane storyline. All right. So back to Parent. So Parent is very much Britain inspired. The people from Parent are called Perts. Those were the ones that mentioned earlier had settled in by the orcs in Teutonique, and then eventually Parent sold that region to the Hessens. There's a lot going on this map. It's a very busy map. Like this whole island continent has been pretty thoroughly explored. There are some wilderness areas and settled, and it is also famous for being a place where a lot of dragons have settled in history, and you gotta pull on that idea of who was the British character of lore who fought the dragon, I've always associated dragons with British sort of fables and mythology. So if you want to fight a dragon, there's probably one. You probably find one in one of these mountains up here of Parent. And there is also Ebercorum here, which is we've got a storyline that starts in Ebercorum, City of the Dead, and we talk about it a lot because we designed a story there, but most people in Parent don't really realize it's there. They're not sure what's up there because it's up in the mountains and in this really remote wilderness area. But they will tell you that there's there's a cohort of an Imperial Legion that's stationed there for whatever reason. Who knows what? Who knows why? Anyway, nicely, I think it's a very beautiful map, and it was also our attempt to create kind of a busier map with just a lot more detail than most of our other maps. And here is Ebercorum, by the way, the entrance to the City of the Dead. And one of our characters, Elvin, is down on the right, is contemplating going into the City of the Dead. She's looking for her father. That's a great, great piece of art. And yeah, you'd go. Yeah, I know you would, Douglas. The university bar for students. Yes, that's where you would go. Okay, great. Okay, so that's Perrin and Muramaki. Okay, so we of course wanted to have. You're pulling from different parts of history. What could be better than pulling from feudal era Japan? You know, we want the samurai and all that stuff. So this is our culture based on, inspired by Japanese culture from the Muramaki period, which is kind of the high watermark of, or near it, of, you know, feudal lords, Japanese, feudal, you know, samurai off fighting each other and stuff like that. And in this case, we've added, of course, a couple of fantasy tropes to it. There is a dragon that lives there, and the dragon is generally thought to be very influential over the culture, very active in its affairs, and there is a city here called that the foreigners call Port Facility, and the people in Muramaki call it something else, but it has an interesting distinction astrologically in that it is the haunt for an Enumian that's the world serpent. And the world serpent is so big that it is always visible in the sky. It's often usually off on some distant horizon. But it's like astrological navigation 101. The first thing you learn as an astrological, what do they call it? Somebody, a navigator for ocean voyages in Chaldea. You have to become an astrologer. And astrology 101 is that the world serpent, if you follow it, go towards it, you will end up in Port Facility in Muramaki. But don't do it, because once you arrive, they don't let you leave. So if people get really desperate, they will go to Port Facility, because it's a place that you can go to if you're out sailing on the Great Sea and you just can't find any other Numians to follow. But then you're going to end up selling your ship, and you'll probably get off alive, maybe someday, but probably not with your valuables. And maybe there's a connection between entrapping ships there and dragons liking loot. I don't know. Maybe there could be a connection there. Who knows? And Steve has our World Serpent map here. So here's the World Serpent fate card that shows what the World Serpent looks like out in the Numen sky, the big serpent around a tree, and this incredible artwork down below. This is fun, Steve. I think this is working really well. A computer hasn't crashed or anything. I mean, God, what's up with that? And here we go. And here is, more dragons. Talking about Perrin. Here's some more dragons for you. This is not just any dragon. This is Theocrid. This is the dragon that lives in Muramaki. So, yeah. We like dragons. What can we say? A big part of Chaldea history is that elves, dwarves, orcs, gnomes, all these various species of fantasy, skeletons, giants, none of these are native to Chaldea. They're from other planes in the Pearl universe. And the only species that are native to this plane, Chaldea, are dwarves and dragons. And so naturally, they had to fight because they're dwarves and dragons. So, they couldn't like have a truce or something. So the dragons, but the dwarves can dig, so they went underground. The dragons couldn't get to them. So the dragons went and immigrated, brought armies of other species to Chaldea to fight the dwarves, and that's how humans and orcs got to Chaldea. Thank you, Lord Mastersky. I'm glad you're enjoying our stories. All right, let's move on to the next one. Ata Emilius. So this is an idea for this map is to have a place where there are two very different and distinct kingdoms on the same modest size island or continent. And those two kingdoms are Ata and Emilius. And Emilius is inspired by medieval French culture. And so there's lots of cities and towns that I don't dare try and pronounce. And then there is, and that's kind of on the northwest, but also on the, northeast and eastern shore. And again, that idea that sometimes a nation doesn't have continuous overland access with itself. And so there is a part of Emilius that's down here that is separate from the part that's up here with a very narrow connection here. The rest of this is the kingdom of Ata. And Ata are Atars, and Atars are inspired by Greek mythology to a certain extent in that they're like Pegasi, but with like a centaur version of a Pegasi. Oh, why did I just close that? Well, that's okay. I'm going to show you this piece of art. So these are Atars, and they're of course, like most things in Chaldea, generally aggressive. I mean, they're really nice to each other, you know. But you know, if you're not an Atar, you know, what are you good for? I mean, meat, you know, whatever. And there is and the Atars, by the way, were born out of an Anumian curse, or is it a curse or an Anumian event where an Anumian sort of encounter ended up creating the Atars. Anyway, so that's a story that you'll find out someday, maybe. You know, when we eventually publish our fate deck, that story will come out. I would tell it to you right now, but I don't remember the details exactly how it worked out, to be honest. But these Atars are cool. We love them. They deal a lot with lightning. They can generate static electricity in the furs of in their feathers, and discharge it off of these lances. And so they they got badass bows and stuff like that too. So they're pretty cool. It's a nice race to have if you need. Are they a playable race? Everything's playable, sure. You know, I mean, it's playable. Would I let you play it? I don't know. We would have to do some planning in advance. It's an idea. I might. Yeah, we might be able to do something like that. I'd probably put you outside of Ata, you know, off somewhere where you're like, you know, the fish out of water character. It'd be a fun fish out of water character. Some character who, for whatever reason, can't get back home. That would be interesting. And would have to like try and figure out how to like get along with some other people, or else they wouldn't have any friends or companions. Friendship might be stretching it. All right, so let's see what map is next. Acadia. Okay, if you are a friend of mine, have been a friend of mine for very long, you know that there's no period in history that I love more than Middle East history, especially BC. And I love, you know, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Hittites, the Phoenicians, the Egyptian, all these cultures from way back in BC time, right? Pre-Christ time period. So Acadia is, for Acadia we pull from mainly Assyrian and Babylonian and Akkadian cultures, which all overlap quite a bit, and some Elamite culture as well. But basically, if you think of the cultures that surround in the real world, the Tigris and Euphrates valleys, and in fact, Tigris and Euphrates rivers, I should say. And in fact, we kind of mimicked that with the layout of the land. There is this idea of these two great rivers, the Kaduru and the oh yeah, I should be careful about starting to pull out names because then I can't remember. Here we go. The Diklat and the Paratu River. Here we go. And these, by the way, are the historical names of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So, yeah, dibs. All right, Lord Masterski, just for you, we will let you roll up an ATAR in a game out here in Seattle sometime. Yeah, why not? Why not? So, and Iraku is the capital of Acadia. Acadia is the continent of Acadia. Let's zoom out so you can see the whole thing. The continent of Acadia is one empire. So it is with multiple kingdoms. It's one big empire, but there are multiple divisions. It used to be multiple kingdoms, but they were all taken over by the Akkadians, which are a specific ethnic group within Acadia. And this is the other place that you can worship gods other than Set. Well, you can worship one god other than Set. Ishtar is legal. I mean, Ishtar is in historical cultures of the Middle Eastern area. Ishtar is like the goddess that shows up in a lot of different mythologies throughout Middle Eastern cultures in the real world. And or sometimes called Inanna by the ancient Sumerians. Anyway, we think it's the same way. You can play any race your DM will let you. That's right, exactly. And we have a couple, and of course we do have a couple of cool maps of Acadia, of places in Acadia. This or illustrations, excuse me. This is Iraku, the main place where the Iltani, who's a demigoddess of Ishtar, who was betrothed to Emperor Kardava. The two of them were going to marry, and she lives here. There's quite a few demigods in Chaldea that live in the prime material world, and this, yeah, nice, beautiful illustration. The river, the city, and etc. There's also, I think there's another one here. Yeah, this one is, this is Iltani, the demigoddess of Ishtar, and one of our major characters in our storyline is Sarva, and Rubati, her squire. We have two places where there is a lot of sexism in Chaldea, so content warning. Acadia is a female-dominated society, and Tavia, we talked earlier, is a male-dominated society. And so in Acadia, men are warriors and do hard labor, and the women are the generals of the military and the administrators and the teachers and the priestesses and basically all the other important intellectual roles, and is forbidden to teach men how to read in Acadia. So, oh yeah, there's another picture of Iraku. This is, let's close this one. And if you've been to Chaldea Studios, you've seen this piece of art on the wall. We had it blown up, and it is called Field Promotion. And this is back 40 years ago when the Emperor Kardava was taking over the world. He promoted this tribunus to a legatus on the field of battle, and this legatus is one of the main characters in our story, Helvig Gustavus, who is the governor of Nisha. So there we go. We mentioned Sarva earlier. We had this piece. A lot of this art is what we call concept art. It was art that was done early. Maybe things changed. This is a case where we changed things a little bit. This is Sarva, but in this painting, looks like a white girl, and we've later changed the ethnicity of the character to Middle Eastern, to try and have more diversity in our story. And but this is Sarva. In our story, she ends up being expelled from Acadia, and she runs away. She tries to assassinate Ildani. She fails, and so she runs away and comes to Hesse and gets granted asylum there and sent down to Teutonique and ends up being in the war with the orcs. And so a lot of her storyline is being involved in that war, and her rise to military prominence by being on a really incredible general of the military. I love that piece of art. And I forgot to point out one of my favorite pieces about this piece of art is this dog here. This dog is Ripper. And it's a terrier but it's a special breed of terrier in Chaldea that are trained to fight demons and or devils, supernatural. And when they get near anything supernatural, like these hell horses, they just go berserk, crazy. They get super powerful against that anything from the infernal regions. And but other than that, they're a really fun little dog. It's a very desirable. Yeah, he's a demon sniffer. Very, very desirable pet to have in Chaldea. All right. Let's go on. See what's next. Was that it? Can you think of anything I missed, Steve? I got no more maps over here, but I might have accidentally closed one. Let me look at my list of maps and see if I left anything out. We've reached the world's edge. Acadia, Atamilius, Dorsang, Nurmaki, Munitia, Panarindi, Paran, Samaria, Tamika, Tritonus. That's it. So it's 10 different land masses. We have, let's see, we do have a collage piece. I'm not sure Steve wants me to show it to anybody, but I will anyway, if I can find it. World map collage, that's probably where it's at. I've been, there we go. Okay, I probably get the wrong one, like not the one Steve would want me to show necessarily, but it's really fuzzy, isn't it? It's probably because it's uploading and getting different. It's probably not fully downloaded, which is probably why it's blurry. So we don't ever show all the all of Chaldea, because, like I mentioned before, there is no sense of where the continents are in relationship to each other. You just go into the mystical sea and take a mystical journey, and you find the other continent. But so when we have this piece that we're working on, there it's coming into focus. There we go. That shows all the different land masses together, side by side, but with these really dark borders to make it clear that these places are not connected to each other in a way that can be mapped using, on a 2D surface. So that's we will include some variation of this. These are also to scale in the sense, so you can see how Samaria, or at least I think they're to scale, so you can see how Samaria is really big. Although it doesn't really look like it's bigger than Nisha or Tamika on this map. So maybe I overstated that, but it's, yeah, that's the whole collection. Again, we are doing a crowdfunder right now, so you could own your own digital copies of these maps. And our Gazetteer is going to have what we call points of interest. Each one of these maps will be a version of it that shows a bunch of cool things that are on that map, and they're designed to just be inspirational for an adventurer. Like if like a tarot card or fake card. You look at it, it should inspire you with ideas for what the card's influence is on the person who drew it. I think a map should inspire, like, I wonder what's in this location. I want to go adventuring there. And so we created, using that sort of idea, Steve has been working on points of interest maps that just show little bits and of story. Like, here's where some weird thing happened. I'm struggling to come up with a good example off the top of my head, but we will have really good examples in what we do. We're also going to do another session where we talk about Chaldea Gazetteer later in this campaign, closer to the end of the campaign, and I think maybe by then we'll know more about what the Gazetteer looks like, and we'll and probably have some samples or spend some time talking about the Gazetteer itself, which will come. And all these maps are all part of the Gazetteer project. But in addition to you getting a bunch of individual files for all these maps, you're also going to get a file which is a Gazetteer, like a collection of maps, like you would expect, where it goes through and shows these points of interest. I can't be too precise on what exactly that's going to look like because we're still kind of working it out. So we will. I need to give myself some room to maneuver there. So anyway, let me. Wow, really. I go to the monologue screen, but then you're really going to see how bad the sun. Oh, that's not so bad. Okay, so you got the sun thing going over there. Anyway, yes, as Lord Mastersky says, we've reached the world's edge, and I mean, you could see how much I love this world, how much I love talking about these maps. I could just talk. I could talk all night. I could just have this entire show could have been just the continent of Nisha, and that's 40 years of DMing this place. It's really a fun and a privilege to be bringing this to life and sharing it with the world. And hopefully this is the first of a number of Kickstarters or crowdfunders, BackerKit crowdfunders, that will let us share the world of Chaldea with you in more detail. I mean, eventually this will be a full-fledged campaign setting where I mean, my hope is that people feel free to take the maps and run adventures, and of course, just based on the maps and what you find on the maps. Who cares if it's realistic compared to whatever we have in our heads? Who cares? Take the maps and do what you want to do with the maps. All right, well, that's what I got for tonight. Thanks so much for Steve Connor for staying there. He's been on the part of the screen that you can't see. He's just been like posting all these images all throughout this show for me to pop open and show you, because you wouldn't want to see me trying to navigate through all the folders. So this is the first time we've done something like this, and I think it worked really well. Steve's wanted for a while to be able to, like, hey, if we're running a game, to be able to just pop up a map or pop up a piece of art, some illustration of something that we have. It would be a nice complement to what Tanel often does, which is live art, where she'll draw things that are in an adventure while we're going on. Could be something like that. All right, well, I am going to quit yapping and bid you adieu. Thank you for stopping by, and we will, please, if you haven't checked out our little campaign going on on BackerKit, I hope you'll consider doing so. And stay tuned for more stuff in the future. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.